Hi again. I want to talk to you today about why the rapture will not surprise us like a thief. We're probably all familiar with the section of 1 Thessalonians chapter 5 where it talks about how the rapture will not surprise believers like a thief. And we're going to look at why that's true. If you look at 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, we see here in verse 4, "Ye, brethren, are not in darkness, that day should overtake you as a thief." And he's talking about the rapture here, that comes as a thief in the night. "You are all children of light and children of the day. You are not of the night nor of darkness. Therefore let us not sleep as do others, but let us watch and be sober." Now he's talking here about the rapture. He says, "You are not in darkness, that day should overtake you as a thief." The day he's talking about is verse 2, "For yourselves know perfectly that the day of the Lord so comes as a thief in the night." Some people think this is talking about the day of the Lord when Jesus returns to reign in Jerusalem after the 3.5 years of the two witnesses ministry. But actually this is talking about the rapture, because we just read right before this. Remember, this is not written in chapter and verse. The chapter before this, chapter 4, tells us exactly what day this is talking about. It says in verse 15, "For this we say to you by the word of the Lord, that we which are alive and remain unto the coming of the Lord shall not prevent them which are asleep. For the Lord himself shall descend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of the archangel, and with the trump of God, and the dead in Christ shall rise first. Then we which are alive and remain shall be caught up together with them in the clouds." In other words, Jesus isn't coming down to reign in Jerusalem. No, we're going up to meet him. "We shall be caught up together with those who are asleep in Christ, who rise first. We shall be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air." So we meet the Lord in the air, and so we shall be with the Lord forever. So this is talking about the rapture. And then it says in verse 18, "Comfort one another with these words." In the very next verse, remember this is not written in chapter and verse, but the very next verse is chapter 5, verse 1, "But the times and the seasons you have no need that I write unto you, for you yourselves know perfectly that the day of the Lord so comes as a thief in the night." Now the day of the Lord he's talking about here is the day he just described. He just got through describing the rapture. And it says that this day comes as a thief in the night. So the day of the Lord here is talking about the rapture, and the rapture comes as a thief in the night. And then it says in verse 4, "But you, brethren," talking to the believers in Thessalonica, "you are not in darkness, that day should overtake you as a thief." So here we see a very interesting statement, that day will not overtake us as a thief, believers. But the Lord comes like a thief in the night. That's how he comes. The Lord so comes as a thief in the night. Now, Jesus reiterated this in Matthew chapter 24. In verse 27, it says, "For as the lightning comes out of the east and shines even to the west, so also shall the coming of the Son of Man be." And we know this is talking about the rapture. We'll explain that in a minute. "For wherever the carcass is, there will the eagles be gathered together." Now the carcass, Jesus, when he rose from the dead, he showed the disciples his hands and feet, and they saw the holes in his hands. In other words, the body was raised from the dead. So wherever Jesus' body is, there will the eagles be gathered together. So the believers will be gathered together to Jesus Christ on the day of the rapture. We saw that in 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, when we read about the rapture, how we will be caught up together with them in the air. And then it says immediately after the tribulation of those days, remember there's times of tribulation on the earth before the rapture, before the last 3.5 years of Daniel's 70 weeks of years. Remember, the first 3.5 years were Jesus' ministry, then came the age of the Gentiles, and then at the end of the age of the Gentiles comes the rapture, and then comes the last 3.5 years of Daniel's 70 weeks, which are all for Israel and Judah. They're not for Christians. So immediately after the tribulation of those days, because there's tribulation right before the rapture happens, "Then shall the sun be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light. The stars shall fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens shall be shaken. And then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, and all the tribes of the earth shall mourn, and they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. Now, this obviously is not the day of the Lord, because the day of the Lord, the Antichrist has gathered the armies of the earth together to meet the Lord when he comes down. They're not mourning. It says here, all the tribes of the earth, not some of them, all the tribes of the earth shall mourn. And when they see the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, he's in heaven. He comes down to gather his elect. And what happens at that time? After the tribulation of those days shall the sun be darkened, the moon shall not give her light, and the stars shall fall from heaven, and the powers of the heaven shall be shaken. So notice here, the stars shall fall from heaven, and the sun will be darkened, and the moon shall not give its light. So when does this happen? The stars falling from heaven, and the sun being darkened, and the moon not giving her light. When does this happen? Just to clarify, make this utterly clear, this is the rapture. Let's look at Revelation chapter 6, where it talks about the rapture. It says in verse 12, and I beheld, he opened the sixth seal, and lo, there was a great earthquake, and what? The sun became black as sackcloth of hair, and the moon became as blood. The moon did not give its light. It became as blood. So it's not giving its light anymore. It became as blood. And the stars of heaven fell to the earth. Wait, isn't that what Jesus just said in Matthew chapter 24? He just said at that day he was talking about the stars of heaven fell to the earth, even as a fig tree casts her untimely figs. And it says the heaven departed as a scroll when it is rolled together. Of course, the firmament is removed for the last 3.5 years of Daniel's 70 weeks of years, so that heaven is visible. The temple of heaven is visible, and we can see later on that in Revelation that the temple is visible after the rapture happens. So the heaven departs as a scroll was rolled together. The heaven is the firmament. Genesis told us the heaven is the firmament. So after the firmament departs as a scroll when it's rolled together, every mountain and island were moved out of their places, and the kings of the earth and the great men and the rich men and the chief captains and the mighty men and every bondman and every slave man and every free man, they hid themselves in the dens and rocks of the mountain. Wait, isn't that exactly what Jesus said? He said, all the tribes of the earth shall mourn, all of them. They shall all mourn. Well, what happened here? They're hiding themselves in the dens and rocks of the mountains. And they're saying, it says in verse 16, they said to the mountains and rocks, fall on us and hide us from the face of him that sits on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb. For the great day of their wrath has come, and who shall be able to stand? And in a way, even though the day of the Lord isn't here, it's the rapture, which is 3.5 years before the day of the Lord. They're right to say this because after the rapture happens, there's only 3.5 years of the two witnesses' ministry, Israel and Judah, and then comes the day of the Lord. So the great day of his wrath is come, in a way, even though it's just the rapture at this point. And who shall be able to stand? Now, on this day, what happens? It says the stars of heaven fell to the earth, so we know this is talking about the same day Jesus talked about. The sun became black as sackcloth of hair, and the moon became as blood, and the stars of heaven fell to the earth. This is exactly what Jesus said happens in Matthew 24. And what days is this talking about? Well, the very next chapter tells us what happened as a result of this. Right after the 144,000, the two witnesses are sealed. In the first 8 verses here of chapter 7, verse 9 of chapter 7 tells us where the believers are now. Right after this happens in chapter 6, verse 12, after the sixth seal is open, what happens? After this I beheld, and lo, a great multitude no one could number of all nations, not just Israel, all nations, all kindreds and people and tongues stood before the throne and before the Lamb, clothed in white robes and palms in their hands. Now notice they're before the Lamb. The Lamb's not on earth reigning from Jerusalem. He's in heaven. And all these people are before him. They stand before the Lamb. So that means they're before the throne and they're before the Lamb. That means the Lamb is up in God's temple. He has come up with the believers. He's gathered the believers together and brought them up to heaven. Because where are the believers? They're clothed in white robes and they have palms in their hands, and they're saying salvation to our God who sits on the throne and unto the Lamb. Salvation. In other words, they just got saved out of the earth. They just got saved. They got raptured. Where are we standing? Where are the believers standing? They're standing before the throne and before the Lamb. The Lamb is in heaven. And this is all nations, kindreds, tribes, and tongues. This is all the believers, a great multitude. How do we know this is Christians? Because it tells us exactly who these people are. It says in verse 13, one of the elders answered and said to me, what are these which are arrayed in white robes? And whence came they? And I said to him, Sir, you know. And he said, These are they which came out of great tribulation. Remember, there's great tribulation on the earth before the rapture happens, before the last 3.5 years of Daniel's 70 weeks of years. Jesus tells us there's great tribulation in Matthew 24. This is not a 7-year tribulation. It's not talking about that. It's saying there is great tribulation on the earth at the time of the rapture. And these are they which came out of that great tribulation. And what have they done? They've washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb. These are Christians. It is so obvious that these are Christians right here. These are Christians who just got raptured. Where are they? They're before God's throne. They just got raptured. They got saved out of the earth before the last 3.5 years of the two witnesses ministry when the Antichrist is reigning on the earth. So here we see that there's absolutely no doubt that chapter 6, verse 12 is talking about the rapture, because we can see right there in chapter 7 that the believers are in heaven. They just got raptured. This is where it happens right here. Verse 12, the sixth seal is opened. What happens? The sun became black as sackcloth of hair. The moon became as blood. The stars of heaven fell to the earth. Now, if we go back to Matthew chapter 24, we see this is exactly the day that Jesus is talking about. Where the carcasses, there will the eagles be gathered together. And immediately after the tribulation of those days, what did it just tell us? They were saved out of great tribulation. These believers, they were raptured and they were saved out of great tribulation. After the tribulation of those days shall what? The sun be darkened and the moon shall not give her light and the stars shall fall from heaven. This has all happened on the day we just saw in Revelation 6:12. This is the rapture that Jesus is talking about. And it says, the sign of the Son of Man shall appear in heaven, and all the tribes of the earth shall mourn. Well, that's exactly what we saw in Revelation 6:12. They weren't expecting Jesus. No, that's the day of the Lord where they're waiting with an army, where the Antichrist has gathered an army together to meet Jesus on the day of the Lord. And they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. And that's exactly what happened in Revelation 6:12. They said, hide us from the face of him who sits on the throne and the wrath of the Lamb. Him who sits on the throne, because the firmament was removed, so the temple in heaven is visible. And Jesus returns, so he's visible. So they're saying, hide us from Jesus and from him who sits on the throne. And so he shall send his angels with the sound of a trumpet. It says they shall gather his elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other. So here we see the believers are all gathered together. This is the rapture it's talking about. And then right after that it says, learn this parable from the fig tree. When the branch is yet tender and puts forth its leaves, you know the summer is near. So likewise, you'll know that it's near even at the doors. Now, isn't it interesting that Jesus says we'll know that it's near? Why wouldn't he tell us the exact day? He's telling us it is near because no one knows the day or the hour. It says 2 verses later in verse 36, but of that day and hour knoweth no man. What is he talking about? The rapture. He's talking about the rapture, and he says, but of that day and hour knows no man. No man knows that day or hour. No, not even the angels of heaven, but only the Father. And that makes sense, because if the Father told the Son, then, well, we're the body of Christ, and Jesus is the head, and we're the body. So if Jesus knew, he would tell us, but Jesus doesn't know, so he can't tell us. And that's why Jesus can only say, we'll know that it's near. We'll know that the rapture is near, even at the doors. And then he says, of that day and hour knows no man. No one knows the day or the hour. No one knows the day or the hour. Not even the angels of heaven, but the Father only. And then it says in verse 37, but as the days of Noah were, so also shall be the coming of the Son of Man. For as in the days that were before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage until the day Noah entered into the ark and knew not until the flood came and took them all away, so shall also be the coming of the Son of Man. So notice that the parallel for the rapture, because remember he's talking about the rapture here, and he says, as in the days that were before the flood, they were eating and drinking. So the days before the flood, they had no clue that the flood was coming. They were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage until the day that Noah entered the ark. What's Noah entered the ark? What's the parallel of Noah entering the ark? That's the rapture. What is the ark? The ark is the rapture. That's what saves us out of the earth, just like Noah got saved from the flood that destroyed the earth. Noah entering into the ark is a parallel of the rapture. So right up until the rapture happens, until the day Noah entered the ark, right up until that day, no one knew. Because it says before the flood, they were all eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage right up to the day that Noah entered the ark. And when Noah entered the ark, you notice that there was a time period there after he entered the ark where the floodwaters didn't come yet. God told them to enter the ark, and then the floodwaters came. So Noah entered the ark, that's the rapture. And then there's a period of time, and then the floodwaters come and take them all away. So as in the days of Noah before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving marriage right up until the day Noah entered the ark. In other words, they had no clue that anything was happening right up until the rapture happened. That's how it'll be. And they knew not until the flood came and took them all away. And that's after Noah entered into the ark. That's when the flood came and took them all away. So shall be the coming of the Son of Man. In other words, the Son of Man will come and take the church and rapture the church and get them out of the way. And then it says in verse 40 that then shall two be in the field. One shall be taken and the other left. So this is obviously the rapture. It says one shall be taken and the other left. One's going to be left behind, left on the earth. One's going to be taken up. We're gathered together to meet the Lord in the air. Who's gathered together? The believers, those who believe in Jesus Christ. We're the ones who are gathered together to meet him in the air. Two women shall be grinding at the mill. One shall be taken and the other left. Now notice that this is completely taking them by surprise. These women are grinding at the mill. They're working. They're working as if it's just another day. And one of them is suddenly taken and the other is left. They have no clue that this day is coming. Either one. Either the one who gets taken or the one that's left. Notice that the one who's taken had no clue. This woman had no clue that she was going to be taken. The rapture came upon her and she did not know it. And notice these two in the field. One shall be taken, the other left. Where are they? They're in the field. They're not expecting the rapture to happen. They're out working in the field. One is taken. He didn't know. And the other is left. They're both out in the field. Neither one knew. Neither one knew that one of them was going to get taken and the other left. Neither of them knew. So he says in verse 42, watch therefore, for you know not what hour your Lord doth come. This is the second time Jesus says no one knows when he's coming. He said, first of all, that no one knows the day or the hour. Of that day and hour knows no man, not even the angels of heaven, but the Father only. And then he says in verse 42, watch therefore, for you know not what hour your Lord does come. Now, there's a third time he tells us to, just to make this absolutely clear. In verse 43, it says, but know this, if the good man of the house had known at what watch the thief would come. So this is, once again, making it clear the thief in the night is talking about the rapture. There's no doubt about this, because this is the rapture he's talking about here. And he's talking about no one knowing when the rapture would happen. And he says, but if the good man of the house had known, in other words, he doesn't know, the good man of the house doesn't know that the rapture is coming. He doesn't know what watch the thief would come. Notice he doesn't know what watch the thief would come. In other words, he knows there's a thief coming. He knows there's a thief coming. The good man of the house, if he had known in what watch. In other words, the good man of the house knows the thief is coming, but he doesn't know when. But if he had known when the thief would come, he would have watched and would have not have suffered his house to be broken up. What happens? One is taken and the other's left. When there's two women working, those people are in the same family. Obviously, if they're two working together in the field, they're part of the same family. If there's two women that are grinding at the mill, those are two people that are grinding at the mill together. They're in the same family. That family is broken up. His house was broken up. The good man of the house, the master of this house, his house got broken up. Why? Because one shall be taken and the other left. Once again, with the two women grinding at the mill, one shall be taken and the other left. The house was broken up. And notice that the good man of the house, he knew a thief was coming, but he didn't know when. He didn't know what watch the thief would come. He knew a thief was coming, but he didn't know when. If he had known when, he would have tried to get that other person saved so that his house would not have gotten broken up. So that both of them would have been taken. One wouldn't have been left. They would have both been taken. But then notice what he says about this in verse 44. Therefore, you also should be ready, for in such an hour as you think not, the Son of Man comes. Now, this is the third time Jesus told us that we would not know when he's coming. This is the third time in Matthew 24. He's talking about the rapture. We made it obvious already. He's talking about the rapture in all three of these cases. So be ready, for in such an hour as you think not, the Son of Man comes. So no one knows. This is the third time Jesus has told us. And that's why verse 45 tells us, who then is the faithful and wise servant whom his Lord has made ruler over his household to give them meat in due season? Blessed is that servant whom his Lord, when he comes, shall find him so doing. In other words, he's not stopping doing what he's doing. He's still doing that. He's still being a faithful and wise servant over his household. He's still doing that. He's found doing that when Jesus returns. He didn't stop doing that to go wait for the Lord somewhere. No, he didn't know. He didn't know what watch the thief would come. The good man of the house, he didn't know when the thief was coming, but he knew he was coming. He just didn't know what watch of the night the thief would come. So this is telling us very plainly that we know Jesus is returning. We know that, but we don't know when. 3 times here in this dissertation, Jesus told us we don't know when he's coming. Then it says in verse 48, it tells us the opposite side of the equation. It says, and if an evil servant shall say in his heart, my Lord delays his coming, and shall begin to smite his fellow servants, and to eat and drink with the drunken. In other words, he's no longer being a faithful and wise servant. Now he's eating and drinking with the drunken, and he's beating his servants. The Lord of that servant shall come in a day when he looks not for him, and an hour he does not aware of, and shall cut him asunder, and appoint him his portion with the hypocrites. And there shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Well, people say, see, he won't know when he's coming. Neither way does the man know. Notice that it says the Lord of that servant shall come in a day when he looks not for him. In other words, he's not going to know when he's coming, and an hour that he's not aware of, and he's going to get caught in eating and drinking with the drunken and smiting his fellow servants, being a wicked servant. He's going to be caught in that. In other words, he's not expecting him to come. But even the wise one, the good man of the house, if he's a faithful and wise servant who's giving meat in due season, it says, blessed is that servant whom the Lord finds him doing so when he comes. In other words, he doesn't know he's coming. Even in this case, this man doesn't know he's coming either. The good man of the house doesn't know what watch the thief will come. He doesn't know. If he had known what watch the thief would come, he would have worked harder to make sure his house was not broken up. We see his house was broken up. One was taken and the other was left. In 2 different cases, one was taken and the other is left. And these are 2 that are working in the field. They're working in the same field. 2 are in the field. One's taken, the other's left. 2 women are grinding at the mill together. These are people in the same family, and that house is broken up. The house is broken up because one got saved and the other one didn't get saved. But this makes it clear that no one knows the day or the hour. So let's go back to 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, and let's look back at verse 4 again. Ye, brethren, are not in darkness, that day should overtake you as a thief. Now, many people will say about this verse that, that means we know when he's coming. That's not what this verse says. It says, the day of the Lord so comes as a thief in the night. And he's talking about the rapture. We saw in chapter 4, this is talking about the rapture. The rapture comes as a thief in the night. For as when they say peace and safety, sudden destruction comes upon them, and travail upon a woman with child, and they shall not escape. Well, what is that sudden destruction that comes upon them? And sudden destruction comes upon them as travail upon a woman with child. In other words, the parallel is travail of a woman with child. What happens when a woman is about to have a baby? She goes through labor. The labor happens for quite a while before that child is born. That labor is the 3.5 years after the rapture. So what happens? What is this sudden destruction that comes upon them as travail upon a woman with child? The rapture happens, and then there's 3.5 years of labor that the woman has. But it says, you, brethren, are not in darkness, that day should overtake you as a thief. Now, we just saw, Jesus told us the story in Matthew 24, where if the good man of the house had known what watch the thief was coming, he would have worked harder to keep his house from being broken up. In other words, the good man of the house didn't know when the thief was coming, but he knew the thief was coming. That's exactly what verse 4 tells us. You, brethren, are not in darkness, that that day should overtake you as a thief. In other words, you know Jesus is coming. You know the thief is coming. Just like the good man of the house, he knew the thief was coming. He just didn't know what watch the thief was coming. So we are not in darkness. That day is not overtaking us as a thief. A thief breaks into the house. People don't know he's coming. When the thief breaks into the house, the people are not expecting him to break in if he's coming as a thief. But see, believers, we know he's coming. He's not coming as a thief to us. We know he's coming. So he comes as a thief in the night to the whole world, in which we don't know the day or the hour in which Jesus returns. But that day will not overtake us as a thief, In other words, a thief comes and breaks into your house because you're not expecting him. The whole reason he gets away with it is because you're not expecting him. That's how a thief is. So that's what it's talking about here. That's why that day does not overtake us as a thief, because we know Jesus is coming. We don't know what day or hour he's coming, but we know he's coming. The rapture comes like a thief in the night. It comes like a thief in the night. No one knows the day or the hour. Jesus told us that. The day of the Lord, everyone knows he's coming. Everyone knows on the day of the Lord that Jesus is returning. The armies of the earth are waiting for him. In Revelation chapter 19, we see the day of the Lord. Verse 11, I saw heaven open, and behold, a white horse, and he that sat upon him was called Faithful and True, and with righteousness he judges and makes war. His eyes were as a flame of fire. On his head were many crowns, and he had a name written on it that no man knew but he himself. And he was clothed in a vesture dipped in blood, and his name was called the Word of God. And the armies which were in heaven followed him upon white horses, clothed in fine linen, white and clean. And out of his mouth goes a sharp sword, that with it he should smite the nations. He's not going to gather up his people. No, he's going down to smite the nations. And he shall rule them with a rod of iron. What happens when Jesus comes down on the day of the Lord? He rules from Jerusalem. There's the millennium. Right after Jesus comes down on the day of the Lord, the millennium happens. Jesus rules for 1,000 years from Jerusalem. And what does he do? He treads the winepress of the fierceness of the wrath of Almighty God. He's not going to gather the people of the earth, to gather up the believers and bring them up to heaven. No, he's going down to reign from Jerusalem. And he has on his vesture and on his thigh a name written, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. This is Jesus Christ. There's obviously Jesus Christ here. And notice that in verse 19, I saw the beast and the kings of the earth and their armies gathered together to make war against him that sat on the horse, against his army. Now, you know how long it takes to gather all the armies of the earth? It says the kings of the earth and their armies. They were all gathered to this one spot. And it says the beast, the Antichrist, and the kings of the earth and their armies are all gathered together to make war. They're there. They're waiting for him. They're not mourning. They're not hiding in the caves and rocks of the mountains saying, hide us from the face of him who sits on the throne. No, that's not them. These people are waiting. They're just waiting. After the rapture happens, the Antichrist gathers together the people and gathers the armies of the earth and says, hey, we can defeat Jesus when he returns on the day of the Lord. Because everyone knows he's coming back after the rapture happens. They all know he's coming back because heaven is visible. And the church just went up to heaven. And they're all going to know that Jesus is coming back in 3.5 years. They all are going to know it. And the beast and the kings of the earth, we see they're gathered to make war on the day Jesus comes, on the day of the Lord. Not the rapture, the day of the Lord. And of course, the beast is taken and the false prophet with him, and they were thrown into the lake of fire. But notice in chapter 16, it says in verse 12, and the sixth angel poured out his vial upon the great river Euphrates, and the water was dried up to make way for the kings of the east. And I saw 3 unclean spirits like frogs come out of the mouth of the dragon, that's Satan, and out of the mouth of the beast, that's the Antichrist, and out of the mouth of the false prophet. For they are spirits of devils, working miracles, which go forth to the kings of the earth. And what do? They go forth to the kings of the earth and of the whole world and gather them to the battle of the great day of the God Almighty. In other words, they know it's coming. They know Jesus is coming back. There's no doubt about this. They know. They all know. Even Satan and the evil spirits, they're telling all the people, all the kings of the earth and the whole world, and they're gathering them for battle. Well, wouldn't you know, they're told to gather for battle back here in chapter 16, and in chapter 19, wouldn't you know, there they are. And I saw the beast and the kings of the earth and their armies gathered together to make war. How long did it take to get these armies together? They didn't just suddenly gather together. Just didn't say, oh, Jesus is coming now, so we have to gather together. No, they had to get from wherever they were, all the kings of the earth, from all the places on the earth, they all had to gather together their armies and bring them to this spot. So obviously the day of the Lord and the rapture are two separate days, and obviously the rapture is what comes as a thief, because the day of the Lord does not come like a thief in the night. The day of the Lord, they're waiting for him. They're waiting. The kings of the earth are waiting for Jesus. Jesus comes down from heaven, and he knows that army's waiting for him. Otherwise, he wouldn't even have to fight. Jesus didn't come down with the reason of fighting people. Jesus just wants to come down and reign in Jerusalem. But he has to fight off the devil because Satan and his armies are opposing him. They don't want him to rule from Jerusalem for 1,000 years. That's why the armies of the earth are gathered against him. All the church got raptured already. The church was raptured. Then 3.5 years later, all the armies of the earth are gathered together so that when Jesus returns, they want to oppose him and keep him from reigning in Jerusalem. They know he's coming. They know it. On the rapture, they don't know he's coming. And we can see that he does not surprise us like a thief because we know he's coming. Just like the goodman of the house, he knew the thief was coming, but he didn't know what watch. He didn't know when the thief was coming. And that's how it is for Christians. We know Jesus is returning. We know it. We know he's coming. And we don't want our houses to be broken up. We want to see people get saved. We want everyone to get saved. We don't want anyone left behind. But the truth of the matter is one will be taken and the other will be left. Some people will reject Jesus Christ. Remember the parallel of Noah and the flood. Noah entering the ark is the equivalent of the rapture. That's the exact equivalent. It's like Noah went in that ark and he was safe. Same way the church gets raptured up to heaven and we're safe. The ark is a parallel of the rapture. And after Noah entered in the ark, there was a time period where it still wasn't even raining yet. Noah didn't enter the ark while it's raining. It wasn't raining yet when God told him to enter the ark. It wasn't even raining. And then after Noah entered the ark and all the animals got in the ark and everyone was on the ark, after everyone was there, then it started to rain. That's when the rain came. And that's when all the trouble came and the people got swept away. And that's how it'll be at the rapture. The rapture, the church will be taken out of the way, and then will come the 3.5 years of the Antichrist's reign and the two witnesses ministry, and then will come the day of the Lord. So as you can see, we're not going to be surprised like a thief because we know the thief's coming. A thief, when he breaks into a house, he breaks in because they don't know he's coming. That's how he breaks in. They don't know he's coming. That's like a thief. That's Jesus coming like a thief. But he doesn't come like a thief to us because we know he's coming. We just don't know when. But we know when he comes, we won't be surprised. He will not surprise us like a thief. It said in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5. He will not surprise us like a thief. In other words, a thief surprises you by breaking into your house. Believers know he's coming. We know it. Therefore, he won't surprise us like a thief. Even though he comes like a thief in the night, we don't know what day or hour, we know he's coming. So it won't surprise us that he comes because we know he's coming. But to the world, they don't know he's coming. And it's a very sad thing because they don't know he's coming. And one will be taken, the other will be left. And the one that's left, that's a very sad thing because those people, they are left on the earth to go through the 3.5 years of the Antichrist's reign. So that's my message for today. Thanks for watching.